Hello and welcome back to a new review where today I'm going to be talking about the 1974 debut album by the band Utopia called Todd Rundgren's Utopia. I think at this point this was actually the name for the band was Todd Rundgren's Utopia. They dropped that pretty quickly. Utopia is also kind of weird because there are two main lineups of Utopia, and this is technically almost a completely different band from the one that recorded a lot of their other albums, like this classic right here. As the title would suggest, this is a side band from Todd Rundgren. Nominally it was its own band. Functionally, it is to Todd Rundgren basically as Wings is to Paul McCartney. He wrote most of the songs. His musical DNA is all over everything this band put out, and all in all, I would bet you almost everyone who is familiar with this also likes Todd Rundgren. And if you don't, I would be fascinated to know about that because that's very interesting. Anyway, what kind of music is this? Well, it's prog, basically, and that's pretty much the way I would describe early Utopia. It's Todd Rundgren's prog band. This came out at a time when prog was ruling the roost. It was extremely popular in America. I mean, just the year before this came out, I want to say A Passion Play by Jethro Tull was either number one or in the top three, as I believe was Tales from Topographic Oceans by Yes. So that was the mood that everybody was in America at this point in the 70s. And I guess Todd wanted to make some prog, so he put together this band and made this album. The thing about it too is I think there was a sense that this was a way to sort of siphon away some of the weirdness from his solo career. It didn't really work, as evidenced by the fact that Initiation came after this, and Initiation is basically, it could very well be a Utopia album. Like if you switched the names, Initiation could be a Utopia album. This couldn't be a Todd Rundgren album, though. Or at least not what people had expected. In terms of the sound, I think the way I would describe this is that it is somewhere between Relayer era Yes and mid-70s Frank Zappa, but it also very much has its own identity. There's a lot of very interesting drumming, random solos all over the place. The tracks are very long. The side-long epic, as was the custom in those days, is 30 minutes long and is really, at times it can be it can kind of test your patience, I'm not going to lie. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not, like, for instance, for those of you who know Sufjan Stevens, the track Impossible Soul, where, for the first 20 minutes or so, it's phenomenal, and then it goes on for 7 more minutes. It's not like that, although I will say the country and western boogie jam towards the end of the track feels very strange and out of place. Although I love that they did that, given the subject matter, which we will talk about a little bit more later on. So, side one of the original album, you open things up with the Utopia theme, which I guess on record was called Utopia. They changed it for some reason. Really fantastic instrumental stuff. Few lyrics in the middle kind of introduces the band and the idea. The band was also introduced on Todd's phenomenal 1973 album, A Wizard, a True Star, with the line on International Feel, "Wait another year, Utopia is here," and appropriately enough, this did come out a year after that. And then you get to Freak Parade, and Freak Parade is, along with I'm in the Click from the Runt album, probably the most obvious case of Todd imitating Frank Zappa, because this track is Frank Zappa all the way. I mean, it's not quite on the level of Frank Zappa, if you're a fan of him, which I very much am, but it very much tries to go for a lot of the stuff that Zappa was going for around the time, and I think it works really well. It's a highlight of this album. And then side one ends with Freedom Fighters. And Freedom Fighters is something that I always forget how it goes. Every time I listen to this album, I forget how Freedom Fighters go. I want to say I like it a lot when it's on, but I always forget how it goes. And then you get to the icon, the obligatory sidelong epic, like I said earlier, 30 minutes long, incredibly entertaining, ungodly pretentious. Because the concept of the icon is that humanity evolves to obtain telepathic capabilities, and basically because of this, we leave our earthly bodies behind. And I think the idea is collectively ascend to godhood via the icon. And it is so pretentious, and it is so quintessentially sort of 70s new agey sci-fi, and it's wonderful. The track has a ton of different permutations and parts. The opening segment is great. The lyrical section has like 4 or 5 bits as well, and never mind the instrumentals. I think my favorite is probably the "Still We Are Here, We Are Still" bit, which just has some great harmony work. And then, like I said earlier, you get the random sort of country boogie jam that towards the ending of the track, and that's just, I have to imagine that's deflating. That's them saying, no, it's not that epic, it's not that pretentious, we have a sense of humor, we can recognize how ridiculous it is, we're not Yes, and that's the big difference between something like The Icon and something like Tales from Topographic Oceans, is that Yes are doing it with a straight face. Yes are saying, oh yes, this is Hinduism set to music. This is religious doctrine in musical form, and this is our interpretation of holy work and whatnot. And don't get me wrong, as the review that I did several years ago would indicate, I'm a huge fan of Tales from Topographic Oceans. I know a lot of people hate on it, but it's one of my favorite Yes albums, even if there are elements of it that are a little weak. But yeah, like I said, this is wonderful because it shows that no, they do have a sense of humor. And then it ends in a very, very interesting fashion as well. And that's really kind of all there is to say about the album itself. It is so quintessentially 70s in a way that prog isn't always, because here's the thing about prog. Prog is of the 70s. This is, clearly. There's prog that's not from the 70s, but it's either the really early stuff or the weaker later stuff. And the bad, obviously anything that ages dates. If that sentence made any kind of sense to anyone. But there's some music that ages more and less than other music, and there's music that can feel very fresh and very modern and very new and not seem dated. And for me, at least, a lot of the really good prog, your Yes and your King Crimsons and your Genesises to an extent, that stuff hasn't dated as much as some of the other stuff. But this is interesting, and this is true of most of Todd Rundgren's work. It's not just this album. This is really dated, but it's really, really fun in that it's the sort of dated where you can look at that and be like, oh yeah, that's so from the time when it came out in. But enjoy it because of that, and enjoy the, to some extent, cheesy synthesizer tones and esoteric lyrical themes and whatnot. Yeah, it's a really fun album that I really enjoy listening to it. I don't necessarily put it on all the time, but when I do, I have a ball. Like most of Todd Rundgren's work, it's something that, or at least his original work, you know, from the 70s, it sounds better on vinyl. Why that is, I'm not sure. I will say, like, it doesn't sound as much better on vinyl as some of his other stuff does. Like, you could, if you want to own a physical copy, you can get the CD and you'd be fine. You can get the vinyl fairly cheaply though, so, you know. And yeah, I don't really have a huge amount more to say about this than I already have said. I think I've said this in some other reviews. Instrumental music is wonderful. One of the things about instrumental music, though, is that it is the bane of a reviewer like myself's existence, because I don't always know what to say about it, and this album is heavily instrumental, so make of that what you will. Anyway, until I come back next time with a slightly better review, hopefully, I will see you guys later.